Welcome back. I'm Ruth Ann, and this is For Those Who Care, a podcast dedicated to caregiving. Today is part 2 of my series with Jenna. We're continuing the conversation about supporting someone through grief. And the podcast has been a huge part of my healing process for me. And I'm just curious, what has it been like for you supporting me through my grief in such a public way?
I've mentioned this before. I'm an observer. And so there was a part of doing this that gave me a bit of a front row seat to this process. And um, I think one of the things, and we talked about this in the last episode, that made me confident that I could be a support to you is the fact that you do have that growth mindset and you are a doer. And so your desire to grow was always inspiring to me and always gave me the confidence that I could partner with you in that growth, because I think like that's really what it is when you're walking through grief with someone. You're partnering with them, you're alongside them, being a support and kind of being available and walking at their pace. That hasn't always been easy for me, so it's fortunately you got me at this point in my life and not a long time ago when I would have been like, what's wrong with you? Because I probably didn't always have that patience that I do now, where I can say, like, it's okay, take your time, I'll be here. But I've also learned that I don't have to do anything. I think I used to get anxious because I felt like I needed to fix it. I'm naturally, I have a little bit more of a masculine temperament. And so I want to fix problems. I'm not interested in like necessarily beating them to death. And um, I don't love like the drama that sometimes will surround problems. It's like, let's fix it. What's the solution? And so I feel like I, this podcast was constantly you processing, and whether it was our conversations before or after we actually recorded or the in-betweens or even the conversations during the recording, and watching you move from a space where you needed everything to be super clear, well defined, quantified, everything had to be in place. um, you needed that order and structure to a place where it could be a little more free flowing. Like that was really cool, but I could see that progression. Now if you had just stayed in that space, I don't know that I would have been able to continue, because it would have felt like it was stagnating. And you expressed multiple times a desire to move past that place into kind of more flexibility. And that was amazing, and it taught me how to be patient through that. It taught me how to be well defined and organized and have more structure, which is really hard for me. But I think that was the cool part, is like, I think you got the better version of me, or the more capable version of me, so I could be patient, knowing I don't have to fix this right now. I don't need to give her a lot of ideas for how she can move past this, because this is part of the journey. And she's going to move past it when her brain is ready to, kind of assimilate new information, or to unlock a new part that is now healed and ready to be functional again. Because I think that's part of it, is this like, do you feel like your brain had like, I don't know, scaffolding around it like a construction site? And it's like, oh, this is closed for construction and it's repairing itself. And it's like slowly that scaffolding would come off and now it's accessible. That's because
Oh,
that's kind of what I observed, but maybe you have different experience.
no, I mean, that's a really great way to explain it. And hearing you say that, I never thought of it that way, but I think that that's a really good description. Um, I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah. I've definitely felt the times when my brain is healing and times when it's um it's just not ready to handle anything new. And there were times when I felt like I was stuck too. Um and I know that there were times when you just gently nudged me beyond that, and I'm so grateful that you did that. You've been such a great support to me through this podcast and just in life in general outside of the podcast, just supporting me through my grief. What are your top pieces of advice to someone supporting a friend or a family member through their grief in a way that is caring and sustainable?
I mean, this might be overly simplistic, but I really think it is like any other relationship, you have to have like honesty and communication. And you have to be able to say, I don't know if I can do that right now. Like I think that's the kindest thing. And sometimes we think that um the right thing to do is the easy thing to do, but sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing to do. And sometimes it's painful and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But I- I've learned that relationships are only as strong as they are honest. And if you can't be honest with that person, that relationship will rot and erode from the inside. And even if it seems unkind or rude or mean or whatever, I mean, you don't have to be a jerk, but you can say to somebody, I don't know that I can do that or be that for you right now. I want to. Like, I want to say, yes, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and I'm going to help you here and help you there. But if you can't actually deliver on all those promises, that's causing more harm to that person than it is good. And what you're doing is deferring that hard moment to down the road. And I know that because I've done it, because I've not always made the right choice in being honest in relationships because I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. I really, really struggled with that when I was younger. Didn't want to hurt people's feelings, and it just took like a lot of things being like stripped away from my life for me to be in a place of kind of self-preservation where I had to be honest and say, I can't be that for you, or I can't do that, or here's how far I can go, or to just be guarded in um, how I present myself. And you can still be authentic and have boundaries, but I think that's the number one thing is you have to be honest and communicate with that person. And the hard part about that is with someone in grief, like they may not be able to communicate back. So you're kind of taking on the responsibility. So I think first and foremost, um, you have to just kind of decide, am I willing to take this on? Like, and if you don't think you can shoulder more of the burden for that relationship, like a disproportionate amount of it, then maybe that's not where you should be. And like, I don't know. I don't think that's a bad thing. If you are not equipped or willing to do that, don't step into it because you feel pressure, because you will actually leave that person in potentially a worse situation than if you had never stepped in to begin with. So I hope that doesn't sound too negative, but like I really think you just have to be honest with yourself and honest with that person and communicate rather than jumping in and trying to be a hero. That doesn't help anyone.
I think that those are really good points. And I would agree with you on that. And I don't think that that's negative. And you did mention in the beginning that maybe it's oversimplified, but I think that honesty and boundaries are two of the most important things, like you said, in any relationship. But when you're dealing with grief, it is such a traumatic time for the person who's grieving and also for the person who's supporting them. So if you don't have that honesty and you don't have those boundaries, like you said, that is not going to be a good thing. And I've had that happen with a lot of people because I know that people have wanted to be there for me that really can't handle it. So rather than being honest with me about it, maybe they're not even able to be honest with themselves. That could be part of it. Um, but down the road, it's not helpful when there's the illusion that they're being there for me and they're really not supporting me in any way. And it's been very traumatic for everyone involved because I've had to make some decisions to stop talking to people because that's what was happening, and it was harming me. It was not helping me.
I think, and like I said, that's true with any relationship. But when you're dealing with someone in grief, they're already in a very vulnerable state. And so, like I said, your unwillingness or just inability to be honest about, whether or not you can or cannot provide support, tangible support or emotional support or whatever. Like, if you can't be honest about that, and then, like you said, you create that illusion for that person going through the grief, when that is stripped down the road, that creates an additional trauma for them and creates a setback that's even worse than if you had never provided that illusion of support to begin with. At least you know what you're dealing with from the get go. You know what you have. It's real, it's honest, as opposed to believing that you have some level of support and then having it stripped. That becomes just another trauma.
Well, it becomes
And
another loss too.
yes, yes, for somebody that's already trying to process a loss, adding an additional one on top of that is not only unhelpful, it's detrimental. So,
You've mentioned how you like to observe people, and you're so good at that, and you're so good at picking up on people's cues, but you're also very good at listening. And I'm wondering if you have any tips for people on how to be an effective listener to someone who's grieving, especially when the grief feels overwhelming or when it gets repetitive.
funny you should mention that. We'll say that again, and I can't overstate this. I don't think I would have been the friend to you 20 years ago that I've been able to be now. And I don't like that's been something that I've struggled with, is being a good listener, because I don't know if you know this about me, but I really like to talk. And so it I just always have something to say. That's how I process. I process everything verbally. And so I people will be I would say when I was younger, people would be speaking to me, talking or telling me about a problem, and bing, I have an idea. I have a solution. Let me tell you all about the solution I have. I don't really think I have a solution. You just kind of triggered an idea in my brain, and now I'm going to like talk therapy through your problem with you. And I assume, like, don't you want to talk too? Right? Don't you want to talk and talk through your problem or your issue? And we can talk through this and we're going to come up with a solution. That's not how everyone processes. So, we'll just say I haven't always been as supportive as I was able to be for you. But I did set out to. I've always wanted to learn and improve and grow and be better. And I kind of realized, oh, maybe I should listen more. And so that's been a work in progress for a long time. So I'm glad to hear that my efforts have been fruitful, and I try really hard to be a good listener. It's not always easy for me because I want to say things. I want to because I have like it just sparks idea after idea after idea in my head when people are talking. And so I've learned to just make mental notes and to observe, like you said, to observe. And I've always been a keen observer of people. I love people are fascinating to me. And I've learned that the less I talk, the more I'll learn about people. And when I learn about people, I'm also a people, so I can learn about myself. And it helps me to be better and be of greater use to the world around me, I think.
You mentioned a few things, but what other personal qualities or life experiences have helped you be effective at it? And what advice do you have to help others cultivate it in themselves?
I honestly really just think that the the older I've gotten, and I still consider myself young because I still feel like I have a whole life ahead of me. I feel like I've lived, several lives, and I've still got several ahead of me. Um, I think I've surprised myself enough times, and I've reinvented myself enough times to know that that's probably going to happen again in the future. And I want to be a better version going forward. Like, I think that's where we get stuck or kind of hung up, is thinking that we've got it figured out. Like, we get over a hump or a hurdle or through a growth cycle, and we're like, whew, man, glad that that's over with. And we think, well, now I'm set. Now I've got it figured out. But that's not true. It's just one level. And I hope I'm learning and growing until the day I die. I really do. And I hope that's like when I'm 110, because there's so much that I want to learn and know and experience, and ways that I want to grow. And so I think it's, I look at past experiences that have helped me cultivate, being a better listener or being more supportive or learning how to be honest or put up boundaries. And I think, what experiences am I going to have tomorrow or 10 years from now that will make me even better? Like, so I think that's what it is it's like, don't get stuck in thinking that you've arrived, because you're just going to disappoint yourself, because you're going to encounter, hopefully, God willing, you're going to encounter another problem that is going to shape you and mold you and refine you into something of even more use to the world around you. And like, I've done that so many times. Now I just kind of, I think I embrace it now, because I don't, and I know in 20 years I'm gonna look back and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe that I thought that or was that way." And then it'll be even beyond that. So I just I think it's just acknowledging, like, we're never arriving. We're always learning and changing and evolving and growing and becoming. Like, I don't know. It's just crazy to me. I just think of all the potential that exists in the universe. And I'm fortunate enough to have been born with a temperament that makes me more, kind of positive and exciting. And, I don't, when you talk about like maybe negative emotion, I don't, fear and anger and things like that. Like, I don't naturally veer toward that. I veer toward positivity. And we've talked about my toxic positivity. So learning about that over the years. But that came from hurting people. Like, I hurt people with that. and acknowledging that and going, well, I don't want to do that anymore. How can I take all the best parts of that and leave the toxic parts so that now I can help instead of hurt? And so yeah, I think it's just knowing that you're going to be different in the future than you are now, and being excited for that and working toward that.
I love that answer. And you mentioned being honest with yourself. I think that's a really big thing. A lot of people, a lot of us are not always honest with ourselves. And if you can't be honest with yourself, then how can you be honest with anyone else? And that's a big part of growth. You can't grow if you can't be honest with yourself. And I've seen both of those in you, your honesty, your growth mindset, and your curiosity and your genuine care and compassion for other people. Those are all great qualities. And every bit of that, from what I've seen, is what has helped you be such a great support, not just to me. Um, on the flip side, do you have any advice for people who are grieving on how to communicate well? And that's a tough one because you've talked a little bit about um, my not even knowing that I wasn't okay at the moment when I said, "Oh, I'm good." But how to communicate with people who are trying to support them through their grief, and how to appreciate them, and to just see that they're doing their best to help you through.
I think, like, and this is something I talked about in the last episode, that communication part is really, really, really important. And that's hard when you are in grief. Like, it's hard to communicate effectively, or maybe to articulate what it is you're experiencing, like that. I don't know, I've never gone through that specific process. But the other part is, I mentioned grief reveals things that um, maybe you didn't know were in there, and maybe the people around you didn't know were in there. And I don't know, this would be, I mean, I don't want to answer a question with a question, but I know the things that I've been through, and I have been through loss. It wasn't a loss of another human, but loss of, relationships, or kind of states of being, things like that. Um, I think when you're going through that loss and you feel overwhelmed by that loss, the last thing you want to do is address some negativity at the bottom of that. And I watched, again, I observe, and I've watched people get torn in half, and in that is revealed some pretty nasty stuff. And because they're already hurting, all they want to do is cover that back up, and that causes them to lash out at the people around them. It causes them to be defensive. And I have seen people use their grief as a crutch and to never heal. And I think you have to first be honest with yourself and say, do I want to heal? And if the answer is no, then you better be willing to say that. Like, I think, and I know I'm saying this not assuming that it's easy to just make those statements. Like, I can appreciate that that's a really tough place to be. But if we're going to talk about what things might be helpful, is if there is a moment where you realize, I don't really want to heal right now. I'm so angry. I don't want to heal. I'm going to hold on to this anger a little longer. Um, Say that. And spare everyone the pain. It's like the flip side of what we were just talking about. If everyone has the illusion that you want to heal and you know you don't, that's not fair to the people around you that are trying to facilitate that healing, only to find out later you had no intention of ever moving forward, and it hurts them. And then you've lost your support system. Where if you can say, I'm so angry right now, I cannot even think about healing. I just want to be angry for a little longer. I'm so hurt. I just want to stay right here. Um, I'm not ready to let go of this. That's honest. And then the people around you can respond to that. And then you might maintain your support system. If you get to a point where you're like, okay, now I'm ready to heal, those people might still be around and willing to support you and walk with you through that. But you have to be like, you have to let people know what they're dealing with. And that's a really good way to lose a support system, I think, is to give the illusion that you want to heal or want to grow when you know you have no intention of that.
That's really good. That's really good. Another thing that I would like to add is, and this is something that I've learned, is not to put so much pressure on your friends and your family members to be there to support you through your grief. You can't expect the people in your life to be, and you said it in the previous episode, you can't expect them to be everything for you. When you're in the very deep stages of grief and you're not handling it well, seek professional help. I have had professional help through this, and I've done a lot of things to heal. And I know that there have been times when I've relied too heavily on my friends. And I wish that people would have been more honest with me in saying, I can't handle this right now. I have had a couple of friends who have said that. This is too much for me, Ruth Ann. I can't do this. I can't be this for you. And I respect them for that. And I'm still friends with them today because they were able to set that boundary. So that's another really important part of that. And we have talked about boundaries, but seeking that professional help, that's a really big piece of it. And I know that a lot of people don't like professional counseling, but I know that I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have that.
Well, and when you seek out a professional, those people have tools. They're equipped to guide you and to use those tools. Um, and they're not entangled or encumbered with emotion. So it's a lot easier. I mean, you think about a relationship and there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not just that thing in the moment. It's everything that came before that, contributing to and leading up to that moment. And so it can be really messy. Even with the best of intentions, it can be super messy. And I don't think we recognize that enough. That, we want to just pretend sometimes like that fight we had 10 years ago, like none of that's still living inside me. And that's certainly not impacting how I respond to you. Right. And so the relationship you had with someone before you were in your grief process is contributing to how you are responding to each other in that moment. So that professional is completely removed from that. There's no history, there's no entanglement, there's no like deep emotion involved in it. They can actually provide you with tools, ask appropriate questions, and you're probably not going to feel emotionally charged by those encounters like you would with a friend or a family member who you have a history with. So I think like we forget, we view everything kind of like in a vacuum, like, oh, it's the grief process and how you're walking through me. It's like, no, this is the entirety of your relationship. And quite honestly, when we've talked about my ability to walk with you through your grief could have been in part because our relationship began there. We didn't have 20 years prior to that of, you know, fun and used to be and remember back when we were and hurt feelings and misunderstandings and all the things that contribute to a relationship. We didn't have any of that. We started off at your grief process. So that was it was pretty clear and cut and dry. Like you weren't gonna think, man, remember that time she was real rough with me at the gym.
Well, maybe, you don't know.
But does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. And it's interesting that you point that out too, because there have been some relationships where I've had to stop and think about that myself, that this response is probably due to something in the past. It's not something that just happened today. And being able to recognize that, and we've talked about this, I have a growth mindset, and so when I encounter something like that, I want to work through it. And that's really hard to do when you're grieving, because I'm already processing so much. I don't want to deal with that on top of everything else. I'm just trying to get through grief right now, and I can't deal with this, especially if I'm the only one that is recognizing what's going on. Um,
Can I say something about that? So that I think brings up one other point, and this is something that I think it it just really is worth mentioning that keeping your relationships healthy and keeping yourself healthy has more value than just the present moment because you do not know what your future holds. And you do not know what tragedy or events might transpire in your future. And I think about this in a physiological sense. Like, I do a lot of things to try and keep my body very healthy from the inside out. And I've had people say things like, well, why do you bother? Blah, 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 blah. But if something happens, some tragedy befalls me in the future, I feel like I have a better chance of recovering from that if my body's healthy going into it than if my body was a mess and then something happens to me. I don't have as much reserve, right? I don't have as much reserve. And so I think about that in relationships too. If we have a mess in our own life emotionally and relationally and psychologically, like if we are not healthy in those spaces, if something tragic happens, we have less chance of being able to navigate that effectively than if we had had good, solid, honest, healthy relationships. And I had someone in my life who went through a major unthinkable tragedy. And I will never forget this. It was very impactful to me because I watched this person go through this. And my very first thought was, they were not okay before this. The family, the relationships, personally, they were not okay before this. This is going to kill them. And it did. Like it was not pretty. It was not pretty watching the individuals impacted by that navigate it going forward. Um, it's still hard. And it's heartbreaking to know that that maybe could have been avoided had they prioritized mental health, emotional health, physical health prior to that tragedy. Because we are all like just one instant away from something completely life changing. And if we aren't seeking growth mindset, like you said, to be a better version of ourselves every single day, to strengthen and nurture our relationships every single day, if we're not doing that, we may not have a chance when something bad happens. Anyway, I not to get too crazy into it, but I just think that's really important to remember for somebody who doesn't have a tragedy impacting their life right now.
Do you have any final thoughts or encouragement for someone who is grieving or someone who is supporting someone who is grieving?
I would say that you can never be too patient with yourself or with the people around you. Um, and don't confuse complacency for patience. Patience has carries with it some expectation, right? And that's important. Um, I think just when you think you've been patient long enough, remember that you can be patient just a little bit longer.
That's great advice. I love it. Well, thank you so much for walking through grief with me and for doing such an incredible job of just supporting me through it and being honest with me. And thank you for being so willing to share your side of this and how you supported me through it and just knowing yourself, knowing your limitations.
Well, it didn't come without some trial and error. So I'm glad that you were on the back end of this. No, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life, and thank you for being patient with me because I know I didn't always get it right. And thank you for allowing me to um, just to be an observer and a bystander and a cheerleader for you on your journey. So it's been a huge part of my own personal growth, and it has been an absolute honor and a joy to, even in the hardest moments, to watch you navigate something that I can't even begin to wrap my brain around. So you're one of my heroes. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.
All right, I'll see you. Bye.